Hi everyone, OT Nikki here. Welcome to another episode of AT Fridays, once again in lockdown, coming to you live from my house. We're actually excited to be bringing to you a new segment today that we've been working on for a little while, signed courtesy of my son Archie, who will be our special guest later on today, the Spring Sensory Sessions. So we've noticed for a while here at Action OT that whenever we profile a piece of AT for AT Fridays that is a sensory piece of AT, we tend to find that we're getting quite a lot of interest in those items and significantly more so compared to other items that we're doing. So we've been playing this segment for a little while. So throughout spring, we are going to be bringing you a different piece of assistive technology every week that's designed to assist people who have difficulties with sensory processing. So I'm going to start this week with a bit of an overview of what sensory processing is and how different AT devices can assist people to that have difficulty in sensory processing. And then we're going to have a look at this week's AT item. So if you're not familiar with sensory processing is also known as sensory integration, and it was first defined by an OT by the name of Jean Ayres in 1972 as the neurological process that organizes sensation from one's own body and from the environment and makes it possible to use the body effectively within the environment. So essentially what that means is it's the way the neurological system receives messages from each of the senses and then turns those messages into appropriate responses. So although most individuals will experience difficulties with sensory processing from time to time, sensory processing disorder is characterized by the source of significant problems in organizing sensations coming from the body and from the environment. And so for individuals with sensory processing disorder, these difficulties are chronic and they disrupt everyday life. And to be characterized as a disorder, sensory processing issues need to be manifested by difficulties in the performance of one or more ADL areas, and they must have a clear functional impact on the person's life to be characterized as a disorder. Sensory processing disorder is most commonly diagnosed in children. However, it often persists into adolescence or even goes undiagnosed into adulthood. And individuals who reach adulthood without treatment also experience symptoms and continue to be affected by their inability to accurately and appropriately interpret sensory messages. And these adults often have difficulty performing routines and activities involved in work, close relationships and recreation. And because adults with sensory processing disorder have typically struggled for most of their lives, they may also experience depression, underachievement, social isolation and other secondary effects. And we tend to find that a lot of our clients with disabilities also have issues with sensory processing. And this is because damage in any part of the brain involved in multisensory processing can cause difficulties in adequately processing stimuli in a functional way. So the first sensory session we are running this week on AT Fridays is going to be on vestibular processing. So the vestibular system, which is a contributor to our balance system and our sense of spatial orientation, is the sensory system that provides the dominant input about movement and equilibrioception. And vestibular sense provides information in relation to movement and head position. So the vestibular sense is important for development of balance, coordination, eye control, attention, and being secure with movement. So signs and symptoms that you might notice in someone who has issues with sensory processing in vestibular processing include for someone who is over-responsive to visual input, you might notice that they prefer sedentary tasks, they might move slowly and cautiously and avoid taking risks. They might avoid or dislike elevators or escalators or even get motion sickness from them, and they often report that they're fearful of their feet leaving the ground. Whereas conversely, someone who is under-responsive to vestibular input, you might notice is in constant motion. So they can't seem to sit still. They crave that fast spinning or intense movement experience. They're always jumping on furniture, trampolines, spinning in a swivel chair, or getting into upside down positions. And they're always running, jumping, hopping instead of walking. So that brings us to this week's sensory special AT item, which is the swing. So vestibular inputs can be calming and organizing, and swinging is the ideal source of vestibular input. If you're using a swing, you want to look at swinging for at least 15 minutes twice a day. And it's really important to note that slow, linear, rhythmic movements are calming. So that's forward and back and side to side, whereas rotary and erratic movements, so if you're spinning round and round or in all different directions, that's going to be excitatory and it's not going to calm someone down. So it's going to have the opposite effect. It's going to arouse them. So now I would like to introduce you to this week's special guest, who's going to demonstrate how to use a swing to assist with emotional regulation. Hello, special guest.
Hello.
How are you today?
Good.
Could you state your name, please?
Archie.
This is Archie, also known as my son. And Archie, can you tell me how you like to get around the house? Do you like to walk or do you like to run and jump and twirl?
I like to run, jump and twirl.
Do you walk anywhere or do you run and jump and twirl everywhere?
I do walk to some places.
Very rarely. You prefer to run and jump and
Yes.
twirl, don't you? Yeah. So what do I say to you sometimes if you're feeling overwhelmed? I say go outside and...
Walk.
No, I don't.
Relax.
I say, yes, and what do you do to relax?
Most of the time, if it's out, I go onto the bed swing
Yes,
or I swing.
and you swing. So what are you on right now?
The bed swing.
So this is our Vuly, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So the Vuly set, we've got a double set up here from Vuly, and Archie's hanging out on his bed swing. You can see he's got his monkey bar set there too, which you like to go on and swing upside down, don't
Yep.
you? Yeah. And what does laying on your bed swing and swinging back and forth on your bed swing make you feel?
Relax.
Relaxed. It does, doesn't it? And you've always been like that, haven't you? Ever since you
Yeah.
were a little baby. What did you used to sleep on when you were a baby?
You.
Me, and you used to sleep on your
Swing.
swing. That's right. It's the only place you'd sleep because it made you really calm and relaxed, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can see here Archie's super chilled when you get. So he's doing that linear movement, forward and back, and on his bed swing.
Yep.
So do you rate it? Do you like it?
5 stars.
5 stars. Thanks, mate. Can you say see you next week for AT Fridays?
See you next week for AT Fridays.